All right, it's been a while since I've done one of these. We're going to be breaking down a Necrotic Wake 14. So not necessarily a key that gets you close to title, but definitely a more difficult key for a lot of groups. Now, if you don't have a meta comp like Disc Priest with having like Shackle Undead and Mind Control, not having things like DKs or Prop Paladins, this key can get pretty insane very quickly and like at a very low level. So I wanted to share this 14. Now, we do have a DK. He is playing Unholy. He'll probably be playing Unholy in all the videos going forward if I do more commentaries after this. But basically, we do have Death Grip, but we're running a fairly like A tier comp. So I'm on the Brewmaster. We're playing Rested Druid, Unholy DK, Fury Warrior, and Elemental Shaman. So we're going to talk about route, where I'm using cooldowns, things to watch out for, and just kind of nerd out about this run. So let's dive in. Now I'll have a, you know what, I'll talk about talents here too. And I'll probably insert it randomly into the video right here, if I remember. So here's the loadout for this Necrotic Wake run that I am running. It's pretty standard, what you're kind of seeing. Now there's a few flex points that you could ideally run. Now something I'm going to bring up at the end of the video is I kind of wish I was running something like Ox Stance, which I probably could have done. Now there's a few options to pick up Ox Stance. One of those options is dropping a stack of High Tolerance. You could also drop Chi Surge, which is kind of okay. Now the reason I was running Chi Surge is to have better cadence of cooldowns to line up with the 1.5-minute mark, or actually even less than that, to be able to pull bigger and do more AoE damage comfortably. Ox Stance would have definitely helped probably on the kind of the last boss of this dungeon. You definitely don't need Heightened Guard once you're getting into like 14s, 15s for this dungeon in particular, but that is probably something I'm going to be changing when we start attempting like 15s and 16s. On the kind of left-hand side of the tree, the only thing notable that I'm running is Summon Black Ox Statue. This is something that I prefer running with. This like 1 and/or 2 points can be fairly flexible. I see some people put it into pressure points, which is fine if you want to be able to get a soothe. Now running with a Rested Druid means we have access to a soothe, so I don't need it. So hence why I'm running Summon Black Ox Statue. You could also send this point into just like Wind Walking. You can send it into Healing Winds if you want a little bit more healing on a Transcend cast. You can also play Clash if you really want to, if you want like a Root or something like that. But this last point is kind of just up in the air. I mean, most Brewmasters will put this point really anywhere. So that's what I'm playing. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get into this. So we're going to be starting off by actually ceasing this Harvester. So a lot of groups will like use an Aug Evoker to sleepwalk this guy, or a Rogue can sap, but we're going to para him here, and then we're going to knock him away with Ring, and that gives our healer access to the shield without getting combat or getting aggro on this mob here. And then we're going to be setting up this first pull. It's going to be fairly large. We have a very, very strong comp for large pulls. Unholy DK and Ellie Shaman is insane. Now this pull's a little tricky to set up. I really want to like talk about this pull, and I'm going to be skipping over parts later in the dungeon that aren't as important. But the setting up of this first pull is really dangerous, and it's specific to each tank. Each tank has to do this part differently, but we're going to be grabbing these soldiers. We're going to be grabbing these blight bags off to our right. This pack with the Harvester. We're also going to be grabbing more blight bags that are patrolling around the room, and the gatekeeper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open with a Keg Smash. This gets me Shuffle. I'm not going to apply Breath of Fire yet, mostly because I want to wait till we have more mobs. I'm going to be grabbing these Blight Bags with another Keg Smash. I'm then going to be targeting the Gatekeeper, provoking him so he moves quickly to me, and then I'm going to be using damage to get aggro on this, as well as like kind of an aggro pull from proximity. And then we're going to set all of this up. We're going to use Weapons of Order. I am running that Chi Surge, so I get a little bit of burst damage because I know that chance of me losing arrow here is going to be fairly high. And I'm starting with Dampen Harm. It's going to really nullify a lot of those initial melee hits on me. The only thing I'm watching out for is the Zul'Rimus Gatekeeper, and then my DPS are watching out for the Drain Fluids cast. And my healer is going to be looking at the Vanguard to get the Soothe. But of course, when you have when you have an Unholy DK, Shaman, and Warrior, this pack just gets absolutely deleted. I'm thinking about even pulling more in this first pull in the future if we ever attempt 15s and 16s, just to really capitalize on those CDs. That was a horrible Ring of Peace. I like went to use it, and then I decided not to, but then I forgot to like cancel, so I accidentally clicked, and it knocked the mobs in a really bad way. Anyways, really, this pull's dangerous. What we're looking out for is these double throw fleshes. If we ever see 2 throw fleshes on the same target, that target's in danger. Now, what's unique about this cast is it is physical damage. So armor-based classes like DK and Warrior are going to be extremely tanky. Druid and Bear form is going to be very tanky. The only person who's super susceptible to getting one shot here is our Shaman. And then next pull is going to be Soldiers into Center Pack. Now, Center Pack is pretty efficient for counts. It is very dangerous for the tank because there are 2 Vanguards. So I'm actually even considering doing this in the first pull, the Center Pack, just to obliterate these Vanguards, but we'll have to see because I'm not sure what my CDs are going to actually allow me to do. And then later in the pull, I'm going to pull in these 2 soldiers that are kind of far. Now, again, you can see my health is getting absolutely demolished here. There are 2 Vanguards that both need soothes. Their Bone Claw casts are what we're keeping an eye out for. And if we ever need to, I can always kite. Vivify as a back pocket heal is also really nice. If it crits, it's like 2.5, 3.5 mil, depending. So definitely want to utilize that. And then one thing I do want to note too is the trinkets I'm using. I'm using Swarm Lords. I have a heroic version of it, and then I have a mythic refracting module, which is been very helpful for some of these like more or less progression keys. I found it to be very useful in 15s and 16s as well, and I'm probably going to continue using that setup. Sometimes I swap into for a new Bacage, but outside of that, we're just vibing. We do stage pull next. This pull, I consider it like a cooldown recovery pull, but you do need to pay attention when there are double harvesters. If these throw fleshes target the same person, that person needs to have a defensive available. Now, the problem is that we often commit defensives here, which I need to kind of maybe restructure this route because this pack is extremely dangerous. And honestly, it's not that efficient for count. It used to be like an okay pull back when spears would cleave and do insane damage. You can pull boss onto this pack, spear, and just blow it up, but that's not the case anymore. But next we're moving on to Blightbone. Now this boss for a tank is very tame. This boss for everyone else is pretty scary. When you get to the 14 level, his frontal, his heaving wretch, starts to one-shot people. And you're going to see that here. So basically the first person, or actually every person gets targeted, needs to pop a defensive. We're hoping it goes on anyone but our Shaman. Now, of course, what's going to happen is it's naturally going to target our Shaman who doesn't have anything. What we should have done here is we should have used Iron Bark on him. That's more or less a communication issue. As a healer, you're like paying attention to cooldowns. If you see that they don't have a defensive cooldown, obviously you want to apply an external. Our Shaman could have also been sitting in Ghost Wolf for a longer period of time to maybe counter the damage. In hierarchies, that's going to be more important, but it's fine. We're going to get a battle res on him. And then essentially going forward, we're going to have things like Iron Bark. Astral Shift's going to cycle back up, sitting in Ghost Wolf. It can also go on other players. Our DK and our Warrior are going to be extremely tanky here because Spell Reflect and AMS by themselves allow them to pretty much counter every single Heaving Wretch. Heaving Wretch happens roughly every like 30-ish, 40 seconds or so. Another reason why Prop Paladins are so good is that well, Prop Paladins can immune the application of the debuff as well as the damage itself using Hand of Sacrifice. Now, this Crunch does a lot of damage if you have no mitigation up, but just using Celestial Brew is fine. If you're ever scared, I guess you can like use Dampen or Fort, but essentially what I'm going to do the whole fight is just kind of sit on these CDs. On a 14, at least, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to speed this up instead of fast forwarding so you guys can see the rotation we do in the room. So we have Frontal on Slagavog. He uses, unfortunately, we did an overlap there with Iron Bark and Astral Shift, which is a big no-no. We want to communicate those kind of things, but that's okay. We're going to just basically keep rotating around in like a circle. So now that we've hit this kind of like debris on the ground, we're going to then kind of go to the middle of the room. That's another reason why I like clearing the middle, is because you have so much room to work with that you don't have to be too particular about movement. The old strategy was to kind of make your way along the wall, because back in Shadowlands, it was very easy to go over percent in here, so you would not clear the center of the room like you do kind of nowadays. Anyways, these worms kind of get out of control. It's okay. I use Touch of Death, and then you can go back up on the stage, or what we do is we just kind of drag them into the corner. The poop starts clearing, so if we go back on stage, we just kind of follow the same exact path indefinitely. Anyways, let me slow this down again and talk about this pull. So these pulls, it's very important to target and single target the Necromancer. The Necromancer keeps all these mobs alive, and you can easily get overrun by like Frostbolt volleys and stuff. Necrotic bolts are a little scary on the tank. They will only ever target the tank or whoever has highest threat, and it's a healing absorb. So let's just say it hits you for 1,000,000 damage. It'll also apply 1,000,000 healing absorb, give or take. It's like 10%. But you want to basically try to maintain only one necrotic bolt going on the tank ever at a time. So the next pull is going to be very scary. Now this pull, we're dragging Blight Bags into the Marauder, Sorcerer, and Bone Mender patrol. The only thing as the tank we're looking out for is the Shadow Well that I just moved out of, as well as the frontals. So we want to be very careful with our movement, and we're facing them away from our party. Our melee are standing obviously on the other side of these mobs, and our range are standing back a bit at the edge of the F-low. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply just going to go left and right sidestepping to make sure that my movement's consistent, so my melee don't get clipped by the cleave. In terms of kicks, generally I like to kick the Fear as the tank, and then the rest of my DPS can just send kicks into like the Bone Mend, into the Necrotic Bolts. The Necrotic Bolts going off on the tank don't really matter because this pull is not super lethal. In the next pull it will be though. Now do note that I have an Anima Orb, the Discharge Anima Orb. I'm going to be utilizing that in this pull once we get it set up. Now this pull's weird because it's triple Necrotic Bolts, 1 from Narzuda, 2 from the Sorcerers, and then the Bone Carver reduces our max health, so we have to be very, very careful. Now one thing I didn't do here that I normally try to do, and I'm trying to get better at, is using Black Ox Statue. If you Black Ox Statue right in the center, all of them, instead of casting right away, they're going to go and melee the statue. And what that does is it groups the mobs up a little bit easier, and it also gives you access to an AoE taunt, which I don't do here. Luckily, I'm able to get threat, but what can happen sometimes is that Bone Carver, as you notice, kind of started running at my healer. We're going to get these kind of guys stacked up, kicking Necrotic Bolts. Once these orbs spawn, these Death Burst orbs, I'm then going to use my Discharge Anima Orb to then keep these guys silenced, so my group can focus on dodging the Shadow Well, preparing for the Grim Fate, as well as dodging the swirls on the ground. And now we're going to be pretty chill until the next set of circles, which then we're going to be saving CC for. So here's the next set of circles. We're going to dodge the Soul Well, and then I leg sweep to make sure we stop the casts. And now the mobs are about to die. I have a pretty sizable absorb on me right now, but it's going to get cleared pretty quickly. And now we're vibing. So as the rest of this pack dies, we're going to be picking up this other Discharge Anima Orb that you see right behind me on the ground. I generally like to wait until like the 3rd or 4th burst, trying to keep the mob still so earthquake damage is like more effective. Now normally, we like to be at this point when Lust is coming off of cooldown. This is like really good pacing because then you can Lust the next pull, and then it's going to be up for 3rd boss. But we are very fast. We have 85 seconds left. So what we're going to end up doing, and what we're discussing in Discord actually at the time, was like, okay, we're very fast. We want to wait for CDs that are coming up in 30. We have things like Ascendance, the Warriors CDs with Avatar and Wreck, and you also have the DK's CDs with Unholy Assault, or whatever it's called, and Abomination. But basically, we're waiting for these CDs to come up, and then we're going to go into this pack right behind us. Now, what ends up happening is I believe we end up like kind of killing these guys off before we really do, because we're actually debating. We're like, okay, do we go to the right pack or the left pack? The more dangerous pack to do is this pack that's right behind us. A lot of groups in high keys, especially if you're watching like the World First 20, they skip this pack with like life grips and stuff. But we are going to end up pulling it. So we're just waiting until these guys die. We're making sure we're getting kicks, and then we're going to go into the next pull. Same thing here. I was kind of like late on it. Like I talked about with Black Ox Statue, if I drop a Black Ox Statue first before even aggroing them with proximity, all the mobs will run to the statue and get grouped up really easily. It's like a very weird pseudo death grip. But we're just going to end up letting these Marauders die, and then I drop Ox Statue kind of late. I roll first, and it ends up not really working. So we're going to ring in the Mage, get them stacked, and you're going to notice that there will be AoE cleave here, but we're going to blow up this Necromancer, like hard single target. And you're going to watch this guy get obliterated probably within like 30, maybe 40 seconds, not even. And so then the Necromancer dies, just like that. And CDs are all still rolling, but that pack is extremely dangerous. So I'm going to try to get here as quick as possible, and we're going to be kind of chilling. Now this pack's really tame. I'm going to do a really bad Ring of Peace again, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to speed this up again and just kind of generally talk about it. So making sure that we're kicking obviously Necrotic Bolts, but we also want to be kicking, see, horrible Ring of Peace. I misclicked again. I was not playing well this key. But basically make sure we're stopping the Frostbolt volleys, kicking Necrotic Bolts, but again, Necrotic Bolts aren't that dangerous on the tank, at least at this key level. So what we're doing is now we're skipping around this pack, and now I'm doing like a very large group pull. So we're having our CDs come back up again. We have Assault, we have Wreck, and so what I'm going to try to do is get enough threat on these guys, and then I'm going to chain these into this pack. And I believe what we're going to do is we're going to pop, I think we lust. Yes, we lust this pack. It's going to be 6 targets. Now, what I should have done is I should have pulled in the mini boss that's behind us, but we don't do that here. This is something that we've kind of, these are kind of the things that we talked about at the end of the key, like how could we improve the run? The run was still really good, but here it was like, okay, we just obliterated this pack, and we could have done a lot of work on the mini boss, and the mini boss doesn't cause too many issues, especially when you have like DK and things like Ring of Peace on the Brewmaster monk. You can manage where the mobs are positioned pretty easily. Now, the way that I like to pull this, though, is I pull the guy off the stairs, and I'm still maintaining one direction, and I'm always going to move this direction, so my melee know where the frontal's facing. Now, the Marauder's at only 5%, so he's going to die anyways, but if I'm strafing left and right and being sporadic, it makes the lethality of this pull extremely high for melee. Actually, range too, if range happened to be in melee. But now we're just going to kind of whittle this guy down. The Shatter does a good bit of damage, but it is physical, so Brewmaster Monk's going to have no issue doing this. And then we're going to speed it up. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that our Resto Druid started the roleplay to spawn the boss. Now, I don't think I have a good shot of it, but what you do is you just walk inside the room. Now, there is a way to do it without getting stunned, but if you do get stunned, you want to be careful of the swirl. You basically want to wait for a swirl to spawn from this monstrosity on the frigid spikes, and then you step into the room, because if it spawns under you and you're stunned, you're going to die, especially at this key level. All right, so Shaman's picking up Spear, and then I'm going to be pulling this boss into the corner. Now, the reason you go into the corner is because you're basically fixing the spawns. Instead of being around him in 360 degrees, it's going to be set around in like, I don't know what this is, like less than 180, because it's like a V shape, a wide V. An obtuse angle, as they say. But we have things like death grips to kind of just grip in the mobs. So getting them in a fixed location makes this fight a little bit easier. Now, a kind of sleeper mechanic on this fight is the Necrotic Bolts from Amarth, and that's why this fight's extremely hard for non-Paladin players, or if you don't have a DK, for example, is because when these mobs spawn, you all of a sudden need 2 kicks on the volleys, which a volley just went off there, which is really dangerous. We got a late stun, but panic stunned, but that's okay. Another volley gets kicked. But the volleys are dangerous for the group, but the Necrotic Bolts create a massive healing absorb on your party members, and it doesn't often target the tank. It can, but it'll often target random players in your group. And when that happens and it overlaps with other mechanics, like the rot damage from Amarth, with the decay, you also just have like random frostbolts going out and random shots. It becomes extremely lethal. So you really, really want to lock down Amarth on his Necrotic Bolts, but you also need to get the volleys stopped. So there's kind of this really weird dichotomy there. Anyways, last set, we used A-Bomb Limb on the previous set, but this one we're going to just Death Grip in the 2 mages, and then we're eventually going to knock the Crossbowman in using Ring of Peace, but right now we don't really care about him. His shots are nice to prevent, but we are going to do our best to get him in. Now, I don't know what happened there. I think a volley went off. So there's a Frostbolt volley. Okay, so the Frostbolt volley is what really, really nuked us there. Healer's just got a pump. Obviously, we should have kicked it, but we are setting a lot of our kicks on Necrotic Bolts. It would be nice if our Resto Druid was playing kick here, because it would have obviously had an additional kick there, but Resto Druid kicking is very, very obnoxious, which is going to be changing in the next patch, which is good. All right, anyways, we're going to fly up into the Necropolis, and this is a weird pull for us. So what we're doing is we're trying to wait for Ascendance, ideally Wreck and Avatar, even though that's 30 seconds out, and then Unholy Assault. So what we're doing is I'm just kind of chilling. We are waiting for this patrol to connect with this corner pack, and we're going to do a big pull. I have Discharge Anim Orb. I have all my defensives up, and we're going to have big, big damage CDs. Now, I'm trying to get a paralysis, as you can see here, but I messed up. I got a little too close. We pulled, so we're just going to go in natty. So I'm going to pop Dampen Harm. I'm also going to, I think I'm going to taunt for Aggression Module. But basically, as soon as I see the first Gore Splatter, I'm going to pop Discharge Anima to make sure all the kicks are locked down, so my group can focus on setting up their damage to kill the pack. I can't remember if our Shaman uses Ascendance here or if he ends up just saving for the next pull. Now, our Druid went down to, I believe it was double throw flesh. So as you can see here, there's 2 that are targeting him, which is a big scary. So what's going to happen is as soon as they both connect, he didn't use Barkskin. I don't think he's in bear form, so he could have lived here, but you're going to see it's an instant one-shot when there's 2 of them. So I could have leg swept. I was trying to save it for the next pull. Didn't really notice the 2 that were targeting him. I believe we talked about it. I think he did notice that they were targeting him, but he didn't react. But that's why throw flashes are scary. And that's why we like to have CDs here. So if we had a sentence, this pull would have died a little bit faster, but he ended up holding because the pull was half dead when it came up. But that's okay. So now I'm going to speed this up a little bit just because I don't want this video to be super, super, super long. I'm going to play it at 1/2 speed. So I had to do a little bit of kiting here because I had to wait for my druid to come back. And the big thing here is a lot of people freak out about the tenderize cast. But the tenderize isn't what's going to kill you. It's the mutilate on top of these debuffs. So basically, utilize your defensives on the mutilate, not the tenderize. The tenderize will do damage, but it's only like a third, or not a third, 2/3 of what mutilate does. But it obviously makes you take more physical damage. This pull isn't too scary. I don't know, really. I mean, the only thing you have to kick is Gore Splatter. And then this next pull, the way that I like to set this up is Brew. Let me slow this down just a. Actually, I'm going to play it in slow speed just so you guys can kind of get the visualization. I'm going to drop an Ox statue. And this is what I'm going to do is I'm placing it a little bit to the left. And this is going to actually proximity pull these mobs. And instead of the collector to like starting to cast, he's actually going to run at the statue. And then the crafter I'm going to taunt. Actually use Crackling Jade Lightning. So what this is, you can see the collector's running at my statue. And it's going to get all of these mobs nice and grouped. Because I'm the only one in combat with the crafter, it's going to target me. And then I'm going to position myself right on the other side of this mob here. And then we can Ring of Peace in the collector. He didn't run. Normally he runs a little bit closer to the statue, but we also have Death Grip. It's not a big deal. So this went off, and then ideally we could grip him in, but he's just going to run in. This crafter will throw Cleaver, then he runs for a bit, and then he'll cast Throw Cleaver again. It's pretty easy. And now what we're looking out for is we're watching this Corpse Collector for Drain Fluids, and we're also watching for Gore Splatter. So we need a couple of kicks on that mob. But outside of that, this pull is pretty tame. The only thing dangerous for the tank is the Stitch work. Similar to before, he's going to be casting that Mutilate as well as the Tenderize on us, making us take more physical damage. So the longer this pull lives, the more dangerous it becomes for a tank. And as you can see here, I am all out of CDs until I get my Refracting Module back up in a few seconds. And actually Dampen Harm just rolled up, so we will be chilling. All right, so I'm going to just kind of speed this up, and there isn't really much to talk about here. This pull ends up going down pretty easily because we have 2 1.5 minute classes, so they're going to pretty much send stuff on CD, and I believe our shaman is going to end up holding his cooldowns until we get to boss. Now we're on a really good pace. Being this far in with still 13 minutes is very good. Generally, you're going to want at least 10 when you're at this point, but it really depends on your group's ability to absolutely demolish these packs. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting myself up. We are on the right hand side of the room, and we are going to provoke the assistant on the left side directly to us. And what this does is it actually gets these guys nice and stacked, so these cleave damage can start really early, and we can easily get these throw cleavers without too much panic. So we're going to line these up. You can see here it did 25% of their health, roughly. Very good. And then we're going to get big cleave here. Now, unfortunately, I think the Morbid Fixation ends up targeting the one person in our group who can't Shadow Meld it. Well, I guess our Shaman can't either, but we are playing 3 Night Elves. So we're going to line up the throw cleavers again and get free damage there. I think we're going to get a second Morbid Fixation, but it's not going to be a big deal. Actually, we do throw cleavers first, and then we end up killing them, and then we're going to go into the left-hand side. Left-hand side is pretty scary. We're going to see the Tenderize and Mutilate again, and these little bits that spawn, they make this Tenderize cast pretty scary because we're taking a lot of melee hits from them. So you generally want to try to kill the Gore Grinder guy as fast as possible, but the bits also need to die for the tank. Outside of that, there's nothing really to do. Dodge the frontal. Thank God they added that animation at the start of this patch. And that's pretty much it. So we're going to keep fast forwarding all the way to the other guy. Now, the other guy is interesting because there's a mechanic that I don't think a lot of people know about. And it's that Rot Spew he has an aura around him. It's 10 yards. I think it's 10 yards. It might be 8, but I'm pretty sure it's 10. Anyone within 10 yards of him is going to be taking periodic damage. He also casts Spew Disease at a player. But that Spew Disease is interesting because it's the same exact spell ID as his aura, but his you can't take damage twice from the aura. So if you can actually stand in this poop if you're already in melee and it's not going to do any additional damage to you. It's only doing damage. It's basically extending his aura to that position as well. But basically what we're doing is any player targeted by it, all they're doing is they're running out and they're using a defensive because the initial hit does a lot of damage. Luckily, Spell Reflect can Spell Reflect it, and we can also AMS it. So pretty powerful kit here. We're just scared if it goes on our Shaman or our Druid. Now, I am moving the corpse off to the corner away from the stage because this guy's corpse still radiates damage after he dies as well. So you want to keep this away, and I'm also moving my statue to a corner because if I kept it up here, it'll pull the boss immediately, which can cause issues. So I reposition my statue, and then we're getting ready to pull. Now, we have 10 minutes for 2 bosses. I believe we have 1 spear left. I think we speared... I don't know if we speared first. I think we speared Amarth. We speared this guy. But I think that's it. I don't know where else we speared at. But that's okay. We're just waiting a little bit for mana. We're waiting for to make sure everyone has their CDs. And then we're gonna pull shortly here. All right, so he was, I think, pre-hotting as well. So now we're gonna pull the creation. I like to back him up a little bit just to keep the front clear, because what happens is he'll throw this embalming ichor, which will obviously start to populate the floor. You kind of want to bait it off to the side. Nutty, thanks for the follow, of course. So he's gonna get gripped down. We're gonna spear. We're gonna lust. And I'm going to taunt my statue so I can get aggro on both of them. And this is when the creation and Stitchflesh are going to start doing a ton of damage to the tank. So this is when you want to use your defensives if you are in danger. So luckily, 50% already is really good. Morbid Fixation unfortunately hits me. So this was a very delayed cast, and I don't know what caused it. I don't know if it's the travel time on the first throw or what, but basically what ends up happening here... I'm actually going to play this in slow motion because I think it's really funny. Oh, that is not slow motion. That is fast motion. So what you do is when he starts to wind up his cast, oh, yeah, you want to bait this fixation in line with this arrow. So this player being fixated is on turbo. So he wants to basically back up directly away. And I'm thinking that it's going to go off in time, but there's still a second left. So this guy starts running. I'm now in the line of sight. I try to kind of scoot backwards, but I ended up getting clipped. So now Turbo needs to, Turbo. He needs a fucking big speed. Luckily, he does a good job at keeping, not even luckily, he does a good job at keeping the boss on top of the creation when possible. And now the boss is going to be at 25%, which is a really, really good burn despite the little hiccup there. That could have gone extremely south. And then what we're doing is now we're trying to aim the next creation needs to go at the stage. Unfortunately, because of my horrible positioning, the boss is a little off center, but luckily Wooby is God gamer, and he lines up this meat hook. Now, double creation is very scary for the tank. Now, luckily I do have a couple of cooldowns, but basically this creation with this creation, both creations are going to start doing a ton of damage to me. So what I do is I commit Fort Brew. And what we're basically saying is this creation is going to die naturally to cleave, focus Stitchflesh, push him to 5%. Once Stitchflesh is at 5% or less, maybe it's 6%, he will not jump back on the stage. So as long as we do a little bit of damage to him to get him a little bit lower, we're going to be fine. Now this meat hook might be a little delayed. Oh no, actually it's going to end up working perfectly. So I'm going to now make sure I'm backing up, I'm moving away, and he's getting gripped. And we're good. He is sub 6%. And we're set. All right, let me start fast forwarding this because I do not want this video to be 30 minutes long. Actually, it's going to be for sure. This pull is textbook. This boss hits the tank really hard forever. So we're going to be doing a lot of healing here. I'm going to be basically using my defensives on cooldown. I like to pull him off to the left-hand side. This gives our range a lot of room in the middle. It also allows them to go corners without really hurting us, because when you get dropped off on the kind of where the boss spawns as well as where we spawn. every time. You'll never get dropped off on either of these sides. So pulling him off to the side means that like there's no unlucky roots, there's no unlucky swirls. You're keeping it set. There are groups that tank him in the center, which is also a fine strategy. Generally, this is better when you have like Disc Priest doing throw cleaver tech, but we do not have access to that. So we're going to be utilizing this strategy. Anyways, swirls, we're just going to dodge. Now, ideally, we stack up and move together to get uptime, but that's kind of fine. What our DPS need to be paying attention to is making sure they have good damage for this Aegis. This will do a lot of damage to us, as well as when we're getting hit by just his icy shards. I'm not going to talk about cooldowns here. All I'm doing is I'm rotating cooldowns whenever they're coming up, and I don't have Celestial Brew active. So right now I have a big Celestial Brew. I'm going to just use it on cooldown, and now I'm just kind of chilling. So we still have access to Zen Med, which isn't a great CD, but we do have access to it to kind of to negate one Icy Shard cast, but it's not going to do much. Diffuse is pretty good, and now Swarm Lord is going to rotate up as well. So I'm going to pretty much use my trinkets on CD and integrate Celestial Brews whenever I can, and then whenever I don't have a Celestial Brew, utilizing something like a cooldown. So Fort, Diffuse, whatever I need. Now, one thing I could have done better here is I could have maybe maintained a stronger Breath of Fire on the target. What I mean by that is with a Blackout combo, when you Blackout kick in Breath of Fire, you get an additional 5% DR, which could have helped me live a little bit better. But you can see I'm doing 1 million HPS right now, and that's mostly, I would say 99% of that is just on myself. So this is a very intense fight for Brewmaster. I can't really imagine doing anything much higher than like a 15 this season on this character without probably a Disc Priest. It's just so much healing required here. And I am pretty much playing like a max defensive build, so I don't really know what I could probably push out. Maybe I can run Ox Dance in this place if I need to. But unfortunately, we had a little bit of a hiccup there in terms of the Dispel, in terms of like, I forgot who it was on, but they weren't out of melee, or they didn't have Spell Reflect up, or didn't have AMS or something like that, and it was close. So we just had to move the boss away a little bit. I'm being extremely careful here. And we're just now kind of... I'm not even looking at health, I'm pretty sure at this point. And the boss, just like that, is going to go down. Obviously, this was a little sped up, but it was a give or take 3.5 minute fight, doing sustained 1.1 mil HPS, which is insane. But yeah, that was the run. Not much to talk about. It was pretty clean. Having 4.5 minutes left is really, really nice. We're hoping, because of our pacing here, and maybe with a little bit of route kind of cleanup, we can probably... We're hoping to be able to get a 15 or 16 done this season, but we'll have to see. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys learned something. Of course, if you notice anything that I did incorrect in this run, of course, let me know down below, or if you have any questions.